Hello and welcome to Friday Live. I am your host, Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer. We're going out live to the Your Strata Property Facebook page. We're heading out to my LinkedIn profile. We're going out to YouTube as well today. It is our Friday Live, your wrap up of the week in Strata, what is important in our space, what's going on that you need to know about, whether you are a Strata owner, you are a committee member, you are a resident, you are a Strata manager. This is a place to be on a Friday afternoon. How has your week been? I can see you coming on in there live already. If you are here with me live, feel free to drop me a hello. You can post a comment on Facebook. If you post a comment on LinkedIn, I will see that as well. I think I even see the YouTube comments. So bring them all in. Give me a hello if you are catching the replay. A special hello to those of you, many of you, so many of you watch the replay. So I want to acknowledge you and thank you for making the time. A couple of you coming in already, giving me a hello. Cheryl is here with her flowers saying hello. Hey, Cheryl, thanks for joining me this afternoon. David's here from Neutral Bay, feeling good, really ready to roll. I certainly am ready to roll. Anna is here saying, hi, sorry, missed last week's session. Well, Anna, I am sorry you missed it too. But here's the thing, you can catch the replay here on the Facebook page. Our replays of our Friday Live are in the video library. Last week, we were talking about points of order and motions that can be ruled out of order by a chairperson at a meeting. So really interesting one to catch, an important one. Lots of thumbs up on that one, lots of views on that one. So many of you, I think, finding it helpful. You can catch the replay here on the Facebook page if you are a member inside the Your Strata Property online membership community. All of our videos, whether they've been live videos, recorded webinars, they are over in your video library as well to check those out. Patricia is here saying hi. Hey, Patricia, thanks for joining me. Daryl's here saying good afternoon, Strata friends. Good afternoon to you, Strata friend Daryl. Gail is here saying hi. Thank you for the big smile. Good to see you, Gail. Patrina is here saying, I made it. I made it this week. Phew. So glad that you did, Patrina. Good to see you. Lots of you coming in. Keep it coming. I see that, Kareem. Hey, how you going? I'm a bit buzzed. I'm a bit wired because I've just come in from a lovely afternoon tea at my son's school, which they put on just before Mother's Day each year. So I've had tea. Before I had tea, I had coffee. I've had some high tea, little cucumber sandwiches and a bit of sugar, and race from the school back here to get it together for our Friday afternoon live chat. So good to be sitting down and connecting with you and talking all things Strata. Hey, Peter saying hi. Hey, Alan. Alan listening from Vienna Lounge. Is that a lounge in Vienna? You in Vienna, Alan? Or is it your lounge, which happens to be in the Vienna styling? Let us know. Good to see you all here. This week's podcast episode number 361. Those numbers just keep stacking up. I am always surprised when I look at those. Project Intervene. Who listened? Whose building is registered to be part of Project Intervene? An unusual episode this week because I had three guests, and hats off to Pete from Audio Concierge, our editor, who manages somehow to make all of that come across as clearly as possible. I can tell you it's not always recorded as clearly and as straightforwardly as you hear it when it comes out to you. So lots of great work done in the background, especially when we have more than one guest. Yolanda Neese, Elizabeth Stewart, and Bruce McKenzie were each with me helping to explain Project Intervene, a New South Wales government initiative for newer residential buildings with original building defects, and a developer who is still around and willing to work with the owners to try and get a solution to these defects. We talked about why litigation about building defects doesn't produce desirable outcomes for owners. And I was really pleased that Elizabeth Stewart, who is a lawyer and I know has been assisting the New South Wales government with the legal issues on this side of Project Intervene, glad that Elizabeth raised that, pointed that out. I hear from owners often that they go down the path of suing the builder developer, exercising their rights that they do have under the Home Building Act, and going through a very lengthy, expensive process and getting nothing out of it at the end of the day, or perhaps getting a small award, which could be used, should be used to rectify original defects. And that process could have been started years before if it wasn't for the long drawn out legal proceedings that buildings are involved in. I've heard owners say to me, it's the lawyers. The lawyers are the only ones who win in that kind of a process. Building defects litigation is not something that I do in my legal practice. When I have owners and buildings coming to me wanting to go down that path, I refer them on to my colleagues. So it's not an area that I have a lot of direct experience in, but I do hear from you, owners, sometimes in the middle of it, sometimes at the other side of it, how painful it is. So Elizabeth really speaks to that in the episode. And I'm glad that she was able to acknowledge that. And I think all three of my guests were echoing a lot of the feelings that you have as owners out there in new buildings, a lot of the pain and suffering that you're going through when you're trying to get original building defects resolved. So Project Intervene is another tool that is available to you. You'll hear in the episode, and if you head over to the New South Wales government website to find out more about it, you'll see that there are specific circumstances where it is relevant, specific circumstances where your building will be eligible. If you're in a newer building, definitely check that out. A newer building and you have building defects, it's kind of a given if you're in a new building that you will have building defects. See if you may be eligible to be part of Project Intervene. There is a deadline. 30th of June is the closing date for registrations for that project. So that's why you are hearing, not just from me, but from other parts of our sector, a big push to make sure you know about this opportunity. And it's a great one if you are eligible. Alan saying, yes, in the business lounge, waiting for a flight in the Vienna business lounge. Awesome. Thank you for letting me know. I love hearing where you are. I love hearing where you are tuning in and learning about Strata from all over the world. Beauty of this technology. Anna's saying, that's just a red tape option, just my opinion. Yes, litigating for having to litigate in order to solve your original building defects, I think should be an option of last resort for some buildings. I acknowledge it is the only one, and we do have strict timeframes in our Home Building Act if you want to exercise your rights. And I know a lot of buildings are just filing that application at the last possible date, having given as much energy as they could to avoiding that situation. Layla is here saying, hello, made it. Awesome. I'll just get you to moderate those comments there for me, Rochelle and Mina, to the extent that we need to. That's this week's podcast episode. We don't just talk about why litigation for building defects does not produce desirable results. Interestingly, we talk about Project Intervene being great for developers too. Bruce McKenzie gives us some insight into that. We talk about how if you're involved in Project Intervene as a building, you are going to get the focus and the attention of contractors vetted by and appointed by the state government, their focus on reaching correct solutions with supervised repair and independent oversight. And absolutely, you will find out how to get involved in that project. I think we have a link that has already gone into the comments here on Facebook and our other platforms where you can go to register your building. Importantly, make sure that if you're registering your building for the project, you are authorized to do that, either as the Strata manager or as a member of the Strata committee. It's important that we are not flooding the project with numerous applications for the same building. So just be careful about that one. Okay, lots of you here live. What are you excited about? Excited about meetings? Learning a bit about Strata meetings? My email that went out right on 4 o'clock to bring you on over here mentioned proxies. filling in proxy forms. Yes, I have been talking about that a bit. This week, we are going to have a look at the proper completion of proxy forms and consider a case that some of you may not have come across because it's not a reported case, that is about the correct completion of proxy forms. And it is one that surprised some of my students this week, student strata managers, as I was doing some webinar training for them. I'm going to take you over to that shortly and talk about proxy forms. Layla, I think, is asking me some questions about registering for Project Intervene. Layla's asking, can a strata manager register a building without their approval? I think that would be a dangerous step. I think a strata manager doing that may be acting outside of their authority, Layla. So always, if somebody asks me, can my strata manager do this? Are they able to? I'm going back to the agency agreement between the owners corporation and the strata manager. I may also be looking in the legislation to see what powers a strata manager has, but mainly I'm looking at the agency agreement. That's the contract between you and your strata manager. What are they authorized to do under that contract? Because sometimes I have owners say to me, not in this context of registering for a project like this, but owners saying to me, my strata manager's paid this bill, or my strata manager's drawn down their management fees, or my strata manager has prepared a notice of AGM and we didn't instruct them to do that. Well, it might be that that is a standard service under your agency agreement that you have when you sign that agency agreement authorized your strata manager to do, and therefore they don't need to come back and seek a specific instruction to do that thing. So always look at your agency agreement. I say the same thing to strata managers when they're saying, can we, or are we authorized, or the client complains that your strata management agency agreement is your starting point. Great question. Thank you, Layla. Who was excited? I don't know, is that the right word? Excited about the federal budget? Anyone? Anyone excited? Look, clearly I'm not an economist. I'm not even a numbers person. It is not usually something that excites me, but there's been a bit of news about it, and there have been some discussions amongst property circles and in our strata circles about what some parts of this budget might mean for us in our space. Something that jumped out to me was the discussion about build to rent development. And we're hearing that some of the big property players involved in residential development, our lend leases, our Mirvacs, our Stocklands, can expect a boost from the federal budget, to support investment into build to rent projects. And this is all going in the direction, I believe, of ensuring that there is some rental relief out there for residents. And when we're talking about properties that are built to rent, we are generally talking about apartments. And that is why this captures my attention as a strata lawyer. I have been on the sidelines following what's been going on in the build to rent space for a couple of years now. It was back towards the end of 2020 that I actually interviewed Adam Hurst, formerly of Mirvac, for the podcast episode number 237. Adam joined me to explain what build to rent was in particular. And at that time, Mirvac was just opening up to new residents the Australia's first renter only apartment community, which was Live Indigo at Sydney Olympic Park. Now, we've had a fair few more communities open up since then. That was towards the end of 2020. And in that podcast episode, 237, we've got a link here for it if you haven't caught it yet, or you want to go back and have a listen to that one. Adam was talking about the attraction of the build to rent model. Why are we establishing communities where the building remains owned by the developer or one of the developer entities? It doesn't get strata titled. It's not strata titled. There is no owners corporation. The lots do not get sold off. It is structured for rental only. What's the attraction of that? What is it that residents are getting out of it? And I questioned, maybe the attraction is the complete absence of any of this strata titling structure and the governance model that comes with it and the legislative compliance. Imagine having an apartment building that residents are living in quite happily, all owned by the one entity, and we're not having annual general meetings. We're not paying levies. We're not having to deal with the intricacies of the strata title legislation. Is this a disruptor? I was asking in that podcast episode, is build to rent a disruptor to strata? And will we start to see perhaps strata managers moving over to work for these developers and assist in managing their communities? Because you'll hear Adam say to me, that's how these communities work. They do have a building manager. They do have a community manager. They have someone in there who assists residents and helps everything to run smoothly. That was 2020. We have seen that discussion really ramp up in the last few years. And now we're seeing in the federal budget some boosts their tax incentives for developers to really focus on this build to rent with the intention of easing our rental affordability crisis here in this country. So that caught my eye in the federal budget. Just heading over to see some more hellos here that are coming through. Sean O'Day is here saying good afternoon. TGIF, I'm with you, Sean. Welcome, welcome. Daryl said there's a build to rent plan for Wickham in Newcastle. Yeah, popping up all over the place, Daryl. I do think we in the strata sector should be keeping our eyes open. Keeping our eyes and our ears open and just understanding this new model and what opportunities there might be, particularly for professionals who are so used to serving communities. John is saying build to rent will likely mean lower building cost standards. Look at what the Queensland Premier has been spruiking lately. Okay, welcome to the conversation, John. Always happy to hear your opinions. Sometimes I can read them out. Sometimes it's better that I don't. Good to see you. Okay. If you haven't come across it yet, the University of New South Wales City Futures Research Centre has a short survey that is being circulated and that I have been asked to make sure I share with you to make sure you're aware of it. Apartment owners are being asked to complete this short online survey. I filled it out myself today. Super easy, a little bit of fun to complete. I think it took me less than 10 minutes. UNSW City Futures Research Centre is investigating perceptions of apartment purchases in New South Wales. And this is specifically recent apartment purchases. Having said that, I think the question dates back, the question in the survey goes back 10 years. If you've purchased your apartment within the last 10 years, what are your views on certain things? City Futures is interested in learning about the decisions that we make as purchasers when it comes to the design of a building. Why are we choosing? Are we even consciously choosing to buy into buildings of a certain size, buildings that have a certain layout, a certain format? Are we buying into tower blocks? And if we are, why are we doing that? Are we buying into low rise? If we are, why are we doing that? All to better understand specific apartment design features and which are more important to purchasers when we are considering our options for purchasing an apartment property. So researchers at the City Futures Research Centre are supported by Government Architect New South Wales. They are hoping to use this information to better understand our priorities for medium high density living in New South Wales and to inform strategic design leadership. Cool. Sounds important. Think we better get on this. We have a link for you to complete the survey. As I said, I did it myself today. It's interesting to sit back and think about, did I make a decision about this? Was I consciously thinking about the size of the building when I bought in? Why did I buy this particular building in this particular location? I know when I was answering a question about the number of lots, why did I purchase into a building with a certain number of lots? And I think I've said this before, the building that I purchased into within the last 10 years is a building that was less than 40 lots. And I did consciously make that choice to buy into a building of that size. Because I know, having heard some research that's out there years ago, and I can't even tell you where it came from now, but it made a lot of sense to me. A building of that size is small enough that you can get to know every owner. You can know them by name. You can greet them in the lift. You can have a general idea of what lot they're in and what level they're on. But it is large enough that if you have a financial difficulty, if you need to raise a special levy, if there is urgent work to be done, that levy can be struck without too much pain for each owner. When you're in a much smaller building and you've got to raise $500,000 for a roof membrane, then that's going to hit everyone a lot harder if there's only 4 or 10 lots. It's going to be a lot easier to manage if you're in a 40 or higher lot scheme, and that 40 lots being the sweet spot. And I know from both living in and then becoming an investor in my community, I have lived that experience where I do know most people who are in the building and am able to have a chat to them as they come and go. And we're also able to manage any financial surprises as well. So good to have some reflection. If you've recently bought, if you bought within the last 10 years, reflect on that buying decision and share that information with the City Futures Research Centre so that they can produce some research to inform future design and have our developers, I imagine, producing buildings that we say we want to buy into. So we have the link to complete the survey. I think that's only open for the next couple of weeks. I think it's only open till the end of the month. So good time to be heading on over and completing that one. Marie is here saying, little late, but pleased to join. Information always relevant and useful. Thank you so much, Marie. Doesn't matter if you're late, guys. You're always welcome to come in anytime. And those of you who are catching the replay, I appreciate you being here too. Okay, so had a busy week this week, as always, but this week in particular was focused on some training. I was online with a couple of different groups of Strata managers. These Strata managers are pro members inside our online membership community, and we meet up every few months online and do an exclusive training session. Sometimes a topic of the member's choice, sometimes a topic that I suggest that I think might be a great one to do some training on. And this week was all about meetings. I was sharing some essential meeting procedures for Strata managers and assisting to cover off some challenges that I know Strata managers face when they are chairing meetings in particular. Now, we look specifically at some of the functions that a chairperson has when they're dealing with a meeting, whether that is a general meeting or an annual general meeting, where you have a Strata manager employed, engaged by your owner's corporation pursuant to one of those agency agreements that I referred to earlier. It is very often the case that that Strata manager will have delegated authority under that agency agreement to chair your meetings. So that if you're elected chairperson, the person that the committee has decided should be the chairperson, if they are not present at a general meeting or they choose not to, your Strata manager can then step in and chair that meeting. And it is something that I see most buildings do when they have a Strata manager. It's often the reason why buildings engage professional Strata managers, because there's a lot of technical stuff that goes on in meetings. There are procedures to be followed. There are laws that need to be complied with. And these are not things that our elected chairs are always across. Some absolutely are. Seen some great chairs in my time, volunteer chairs, not professionals, but most aren't. And your Strata manager has done the training, has done upskilled, done their education through people like me, and been able to bring to the table these skills as a chair. So Strata managers who are in this position as chairpersons, I think the term is chairs. I try to say chairs. I definitely don't say chairman. Not anymore. We don't say chairman. You're a chairperson, or I think technically the correct term is a chair. The chairs are having to deal with controversial meetings from time to time. especially the meetings that I go to. Because if I'm going to a meeting as a lot owner's engaged lawyer, then there is probably something going on in that community that is causing some conflict, that is causing some controversy. So I've attended many meetings for owners over the years. I've been engaged by owners corporations to actually act in the position of chair, been engaged by owners corporations to attend meetings. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of different methods used by strata managers trying to deal with meetings that might be controversial, trying to resolve conflict, trying to keep people from harming each other, literally keep people from harming each other at these strata meetings. So in getting online with these pro members, with these exclusive training, I'm bringing a lot of that experience and not just knowledge of the legislation, but understanding of what goes on in really difficult meetings to the table as well. So in this session, we talked about conflict resolution and some skills and strategies that strata managers might use if you're in a high conflict situation, compliance with legislation, and all the different parts of our act that we need to be across when we're talking about meetings, from quorums to proxies to special resolutions to adjournments. We talked about time management. And once again, often the meetings that I'm involved in are meetings that will go on for hours and hours. And in recent times, I'd say at least twice within the last year, I've been at meetings where the venue where the meeting is being held is closing for the night. It's like 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and the venue is closing. And those at the strata meeting at the AGM are told, you got to get out, we got to leave. We're only at motion 32 of 46 motions, but we have to finish. So how do we better manage time as a chair to be able to avoid that kind of situation? Or if we do end up in that situation, how do we effectively adjourn a meeting so that we can come back to the motions that we haven't been able to get to on another date? And we also talked about adapting to advances in technology. There were so many things that we could talk about in a webinar about meetings, but I chose this component, adapting to advances in technology, because once again, more and more I am hearing from owners that online voting platforms, that the software that strata managers are using for online voting is not quite as user-friendly as owners might want it to be. Or the software can be user-friendly and can be very powerful and is doing great things, but it's not being explained to owners exactly how to use it properly, how it's going to work. For some owners, it's the first time they may be having a meeting using a new type of software. And when I chat to them on the owner side of things, they can be quite overwhelmed by that and feel like they don't understand how to use the platform, don't understand how it's different to what they've done before. So I think our strata managers who are properly investing time and investing money in these types of platforms should also be sure to and be reminded to be engaging with owners about how best to be using this software and using these platforms, and to make sure that the platforms are right. There are a couple of things that come up in terms of the way some motions are put together by the software. I had one example a couple of weeks ago with a client who produced an agenda to me, an owner client who said, Amanda, here's our agenda. And it says that every motion has been put forward by the strata committee. Automatically says every motion put forward by the strata committee. And I'm on the strata committee, and I know we didn't put those motions forward. And when I asked the strata manager about that, the answer I got was, that's just the way the software does it. That's just the way the software does it. Not an answer that made my client very happy. That's not the answer that we want to be giving to our clients. We want to be having a chat to the software provider if we can, explaining that it is really important that when we have an AGM and we have motions proposed by different people, by different owners, that the software can say who is proposing the motion. Where we have a motion that is proposed by the strata committee, absolutely it should say that. And perhaps where we have a motion that is a statutory motion, it's a motion that's in the legislation, where our legislation says you must put this motion forward at each AGM, maybe the software can say that. That'd be cool. Does anyone's software do that? I'm not sure I've seen it. What was happening in this example I was being shown is that even statutory motions to approve financial statements, to elect the strata committee, were shown as being proposed by the Strata committee. And because there was some conflict within owners on the committee, that wasn't something that all Strata committee members were comfortable with. So in this session this week, where I was training these pro members, I was drawing their attention to some of these real life examples that I was hearing on the ground about problems with the software, and encouraging them to go back and have a chat to their software providers and just say, look, is there anything we can do about this? Because now that we have this knowledge of what's required by the legislation, we absolutely need to be making sure that our software is compliant with that. Something else that we talked about in some detail on this training was proxies and filling in proxy forms. And I am going to take you over to show you, first of all, a standard proxy form. Many of you will be familiar with that. And then I'm going to chat about a tribunal case. Decision from just a couple of years ago about filling in a proxy form and what makes a proxy valid, or in that case, perhaps more importantly, invalid. When I taught this week, there were a few Strata managers I know who were online for the training who were surprised by what this case had to say. So I thought it was a good one to bring here to our Friday Live chat. Just checking these comments here. Patrina's asking, is it only for high-rise or standalone units? I'm not sure if you're asking about the survey or you're asking about Project Intervene. So Patrina, head over and check the Project Intervene website to see whether or not you're eligible, your particular building is eligible for Project Intervene. The UNSW survey is for everyone. So any apartment owner, whether you are, I have a feeling you might be in townhouses, Patrina, so that might be the reason you're asking me about that. Definitely you could complete that survey. Emiliana is doing the survey. Awesome. Sean's asking me about these sessions for pro members. I'll come back and chat to you privately about that one, Sean. Exclusive online training for pro members. These are sessions that, Sean, I am doing one-on-one with particular management companies. So that's why you may not have heard about that one, even as a pro member. So if that's something that you want to chat about, we certainly can. I'm going to come back to that towards the end of today's chat, because I've got some exciting news about the elevation, I'm calling it the elevation of our status. Your Strata property status has been elevated in the eyes of fair trading, and it has to do with training and CPD. So I'll come back to that, Sean. John is saying that's legally problematic. Yes, where motions are incorrectly attributed to the Strata committee. Yep. I agree with you, John, and that was the problem that my clients were concerned about with this example, and that I was then pointing out to our managers. And Anna just wants to go back to physical meetings. It's a good point, Anna. Is your building having any physical meetings, or is everything online now? I still like the idea of a physical, a face-to-face AGM. I can tell you that. Great time to catch up with everybody and to be able to have some discussions even outside the meeting about things that might be a concern to owners, for owners to see their committee members, to hear their committee members, to, you know what I was going to say, to touch their committee. No, we don't need to be doing that. But yes, physical meetings, I think, absolutely have a place. And I would like to be seeing our buildings have at least one physical face-to-face meeting each year. And I said, we're doing everything online. Okay, interesting. John thinks most of his residents are AI, artificial intelligence, never been cited. Is that the residents or the committee members? Yes, definitely a place for physical meetings. All right, let's talk about proxies. I am going to share my screen here with you. And what you're going to see here is the New South Wales Fair Trading Standard Proxy Appointment Form. Now, the reason we have a standard proxy appointment form is because our legislation says that there is to be one. A proxy must take the form approved by the secretary being the secretary of the Office of Fair Trading. That's not the correct example, but the regulator. The form has to take this shape because our legislation says it is a standard form. There are, I was asked this in relation to something else recently. Nominee, and a committee nomination. I was asked, Amanda, why does our committee nomination form look different to what I've seen in other communities from other strata managers? The strata manager, I don't think, has all the right things on the committee nomination form. Isn't there a standard form? And I said, no. I said, no, there isn't a standard form for committee nominations if you want to make a written nomination, because our legislation doesn't say there has to be. And so then strata managers are producing their own committee nomination forms to be able to give out to anyone who wants to nominate in writing for the committee. That's why you'll see those are different. But your proxy forms should always look pretty much like this. They may or may not have the fair trading banner on them, but they need to contain all of this information. And all of these questions, all of these blanks in the form, all of this information does need to be provided in order for the proxy form to be valid. It has to be dated. It has to say who the owners of the lot are and what their lot number is, what is the strata plan number? Who are they appointing? You can see here we have the fallback position there, which you don't need to fill in. You don't need to fill in the fallback position, but it does mean that if your proxy holder holds too many proxies, then your vote may not count because your proxy may not go to somebody else. But there's a fallback position here to fill in another proxy holder, just in case your proxy holder has too many. It's important to select one or two. This form authorizes the proxy to vote on your behalf on all matters or only specified matters. Important, absolutely, to select either one or two. Part 3 in the proxy form. If a vote is taken on whether the agent, managing agent, strata managing agent should be appointed or remain in office, or whether another managing agent is to be appointed, this is how we want this is how we want the proxy to vote. Now, this part 3 of the form was the subject of some litigation. A couple of years ago, the case in question is called Warren and the owners of strata plan number 61618. I have a copy of the case for you. It is unreported, so that means you won't find it on Case Law New South Wales, you won't find it on OSLI, but it was drawn to my attention in our member forum, I think by a strata manager. And I was then given a copy of the written decision and had a good read of it. And it's a very good decision for answering the question, is a proxy form valid if this part 3 has not been filled in and the owner has not directed the proxy on how to vote on the appointment of a strata manager? We have a link to the case, which is well worth a read, that Mina and Rochelle have, I think just this second, posted here into the comments. I'm also seeing Anna asking for a link to the standard proxy form, and Daryl helpfully has done just that. Thank you very much, Daryl. The Warren case. This is a case that involved the Finger Wharf at Woolloomooloo, quite a famous building in Sydney. And that is a building that has over 200 lots. So lots going on at that building. And at a particular AGM, the strata manager was up for reappointment. There was a motion on the agenda to reappoint the incumbent strata manager. There were 90 proxy forms that were submitted out of 212 lots, 90 proxy forms, and 60 of those proxy forms left this part 3. I don't think you can see my mouse. I can see my mouse, but part 3, you can see it there on the screen. It was left blank. The owner who was appointing the proxy did not fill in how they wanted their proxy holder to vote on this particular motion for the reappointment of the strata manager. There were some other issues with the meeting relating to notice periods as well, but ultimately an owner brought a challenge to the tribunal and said these 60 proxy forms, which were relied on for votes on other motions, were not properly filled in because they didn't stipulate a preference for what was to happen with the strata manager at part 3. And therefore these forms, said the owner, are invalid. And if the forms are invalid, then everything that proxy holder voted on at the meeting is called into question, and those motions too, the resolutions of those motions may also be invalid. And what the tribunal said in considering this question is that while the form may not be in the clearest format, it could be, and yes, the tribunal member did say that, it could be set out a little more clearly for us. The fact is that all of these parts, part 1 or 2, part 3, and part 4, the signature, all need to be filled in order for the proxy form to be valid. So if there is to be a vote on the appointment of a strata manager, whether you're appointing a new manager or whether you're reappointing the existing under a new contract, if that's on the agenda, then part 3 needs to be filled out. Otherwise, the entire form, said the tribunal, the entire form is invalid. And anything that those proxy holders voted on may be, that the resolutions of those motions may as well be invalid and not be able to be counted as passed or as failed. That, when I was sharing that with strata managers this week and sharing this case, came as a surprise to many managers. For some managers, it was their understanding that if this part wasn't filled in, then the proxy holder could not vote on that motion. It wasn't that the form was invalid, it was that the proxy holder could not vote on that particular motion about the appointment of the strata manager. No, our tribunal said, in this case, a single member of the tribunal, I don't believe there's been another case on point, but single member of the tribunal said, if there is a vote to be taken on whether the strata managing agent is to be appointed, and there's a proxy holder, if that proxy is going to be valid, part 3 needs to be filled out, if it's going to be valid for any of the motions on the agenda. Surprise to you? It's a really good one to be across if you are a chair who is asked to determine the quorum at a general meeting. And we determine the quorum by looking at who do we have in attendance, who is present, who is eligible to vote. We must have a look at whether or not our proxy forms are valid. Really important for chairs to understand this, to be able to make that assessment of whether or not a proxy form is valid. One question off the back of this discussion about the appointment of strata managing agents and whether proxies were validly filled in and whether they could be exercised on a particular motion. One question that came up, which I thought was another great one, great question and great one to bring here to live to make sure you're aware of and across, is whether a strata manager can vote as a proxy holder for their own appointment or their own reappointment. So very often our strata managers are holding proxies. The proxy might be directed to the chair and the chair is the strata manager. An owner may not have anyone else who they know in the building who can attend and exercise their votes, so they direct their proxy to the strata manager. And the question I was asked this week was, if the proxy form is filled in, everything's great, tick, 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 we've complied with everything we need to, part 3 is filled in, and part 3 says, if a vote is taken on whether XYZ agency should be reappointed, I want the proxy to vote in favour of XYZ agency. Can the strata manager use that proxy to vote in favour of their own appointment or their own reappointment? Some of you may know the answer to this. Some strata managers who are tuning in, I'm talking slowly and giving you the opportunity to let me know if you think you might know the answer. Daryl has said there are limits set out in the Strata Schemes Management Act. Yes. When I was asked this question, Daryl, that's immediately where my head went. Isn't there something about this in the Strata Schemes Management Act that prevents a strata manager voting for their own reappointment? I had this little tickle of a memory in there that there's something in the act about this. And I didn't answer the question on the spot because I've learnt that lesson. I said to the person attending the training, I said, I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to get back to you on this. I'm going to look it up because I think there's a section of the act that deals with this. So yeah, had the same feeling that you did, Daryl. Peter's saying, interesting. Can attendees view the proxy forms? Well, what are proxy forms? Peter, they are records of the owners corporation. So ultimately, I say yes, owners and those who are authorized by owners may inspect the records of the owners corporation. What should the records of the owners corporation include? They should include proxy forms. I don't encourage that happening at the meeting. That should happen after the meeting. The chair's authority should be recognized and respected at a meeting. And if the chair says, I've looked at these proxies and this is what the quorum is, this is how many people we have present and eligible to vote by proxy and in person, that's what the chair's declared. If you as an owner want to go and maybe check that down the track, as I have done for clients, then yes, those proxy forms should be within the records and you should be able to inspect those. But returning to our question about whether strata managers can vote for their own appointment or their own reappointment if they're holding a properly completed proxy form. Daryl said, I think there's something in the legislation about this. Daryl is correct. The place where we need to look in our legislation is Schedule 1 to our Strata Schemes Management Act, which I am becoming our friend. Schedule 1 is our friend here on live. I think I've been here a few times in the last few weeks. There is a clause in Schedule 1 which is all about general meeting procedures of the owners corporation. That's a general meeting. Schedule 2 is about meeting procedures of the Strata Committee. If we scroll down to, I believe, clause 25, it's a long schedule. This part is in clause 25, I think. Rights of proxies and limits on votes by proxies. Keep on scrolling to our relevant subclause. It is subclause 7 in clause 25, schedule 1 to our Strata Schemes Management Act. There are limits on the exercise of proxies by building managers, on-site residential property managers, and strata managing agents. So this is kind of like a heading to the clause, and then this is the substance. A vote by a proxy who is a building manager, an on-site residential property manager, or a strata managing agent is invalid if it would obtain or assist in obtaining a pecuniary interest for or confer or assist in conferring any other material benefit on the proxy. And if we read further into clause 8, it tells us what kinds of things might be considered material benefits. They are an extension of the term or an additional term of appointment for the strata manager, an increase in their remuneration, a decision to not proceed with or withdraw or settle litigation. So where a strata manager who is a person is holding a proxy and there is a motion put forward for their company's appointment, reappointment, increase in their fees, motion to withdraw legal proceedings against them, they should not be voting on that motion. And I read strata managing agent as, yes, the company that is the strata managing agent and indeed their employees and their personal representatives, those who are there in their name. It's easy to see how a reappointment of a strata manager's company is going to potentially confer or assist in conferring a material benefit on that proxy who continues to maintain their employment because of the renewal of that contract. I have been involved in cases where this clause in particular has been relied on, where we had building managers who are often very good at, very skilled at, very practiced at collecting proxies prior to a meeting, especially in our larger buildings, which is often where we see building managers doing a lot of good work. Building managers collecting proxies ahead of meetings where their contract is up for consideration. And I've had to look quite closely at this clause a couple of times in that context to work out who was exercising the proxy, how and to what extent they may have been connected to the building management company, the actual entity that was contracting with the owners corporation to provide services, and what type of material benefit may be conferred on them. I do think that if you're a strata manager, a building manager, an on-site property manager, if you are trying to read carefully into this clause and wondering if maybe I fall into this category, maybe my husband falls into this category, maybe my brother who's a staff member falls, if you're thinking about maybe, then you do. You really need to stay away from it. If there's any question that your exercise of this proxy may be conferring a material benefit on you if you were to exercise it in favor of a motion or against a motion, however you are exercising it. If you're thinking about it, then you're probably falling into this category of needing to stay away from that danger zone. So that was my answer to this question about even if the proxy's fully completed, part 3 is filled out, it's otherwise a valid proxy form. Should the strata manager be exercising it on that motion? No, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. And it occurred to me that that may not be as well known as it should be. A few questions coming in to Facebook here. I will just head over and have a little look. Peter, I've answered your question about viewing proxy forms. John has said you have to go through a messy process and may need to pay. Yeah, good point, John. Inspecting the records of the owners corporation, technically it is done by applying for an appointment, making an appointment to inspect the records, and there is a statutory fee. Statutory meaning it's a fee under the legislation. That fee is $34.10 for the first hour. Yes, first hour. $34.10, including GST, for the first hour, payable to the owners corporation. Payable to the owners corporation, not to the strata manager. I've had that debate over the counter at a strata manager's office before. It's a fee payable to the owners corporation, and you have to set a date, time, go and inspect the records. Some committees will instruct their strata managers to look, we know this is an owner, we're not going to make them inspect the records. If they want something in particular that we know they're entitled to, please, strata manager, just send it to them. If they want the proxy forms, just send it to them. Maybe they pay their $34.10, maybe they don't. But in well-functioning communities where an owner is looking for something specific, is able to articulate that, is willing to pay the fee, I don't see why those documents shouldn't simply be handed over in the least in the most cooperative way possible. Anna is asking, if the person named on the proxy has been changed, does that make it invalid? We had a case where the person chosen could not make an AGM at the last minute and the proxy form was changed. Well, the question is whether the owner made that change, Anna, I think. If the owner is the one signing the form, so the proxy holder doesn't have to sign anything. The owner is the one signing the form. If they want to make changes on that form ahead of the meeting, then that's a matter for them. For that reason, I'd suggest that any owners who are making changes on proxy forms, crossing things out, should initial those changes. And if the chair was unsure and suspected some tampering with a proxy form, then the person to contact to check that would be the owner. And it might be a matter of a simple phone call to say, hey, who did you appoint? Who did you appoint as your proxy holder here tonight? Just checking that I'm reading the form correctly, that I've got the right form. So yeah, forms can be changed in large buildings of over 100 lots. Bear in mind that proxy forms have to go in to the secretary 24 hours before the meeting. That's what our legislation says. Buildings that are 100 lots or less, you can take the form with you to the meeting and just hand it over when you're checking in there. So 24 hours before leaves little time for proxy forms to be changed, and it is not possible to be submitting proxy forms for large buildings within 24 hours of the meeting. Those proxies should not be accepted. Patrina's saying directors of companies need to have authorization from the company that owns the unit in their name to vote. Yes, they do. They need to appoint a company nominee, Patrina. So a company nominee is named on the strata roll. The company has informed the owners corporation that their company nominee is so-and-so individual. That company nominee is named on the strata roll. And then that company nominee can attend and vote in their own right as a person. They don't need to be a proxy holder. If they are a company nominee, then they can attend. If the company is appointing someone else who's not the company nominee, then the company should be filling in a proxy form. That's one way to do it. They fill in a proxy form and appoint someone different who's not the company nominee to attend and vote, or they update their company nominee. They may, for that meeting, say, I've got a different company nominee. This is who it is. Therefore, that person is then named on the strata roll and can vote. If they don't want to do that, company nominee stays the same and they appoint somebody different by proxy. Hope that makes sense. That's a really good question that trips some people up sometimes. Name your company nominees on the Strata roll and you don't have to worry about proxy forms. Anna is asking if the party nominated on a building manager, Strata manager, or if the proxy glasses, if the proxy nominated is not a building manager, Strata manager, or the like, is there a limit on the number of proxies a person can take? Absolutely, all the time, every day of the week, there is a limit on proxies. Anna, in a building of, you can tell me if I got this wrong, 20 lots or less, one proxy, one person. In a building of more than 20 lots, a person can hold the number of proxies that is equivalent to 5% of the number of lots in the building. Okay, so work that one out. I think still in a building of 40, that still leaves you with still being able to hold one proxy. We need to be getting up to 50 lots, I think, to be able to hold 2 proxies. My maths is terrible. You'll let me know. But yeah, it doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter who you are, the limit on proxies applies. New South Wales. This is New South Wales legislation. Okay, great questions. I have, I think I've hit a subject here, proxy forms and company nominees, Strata roll listings, that there are a lot of questions about, as I suspected. And maybe we can do an even deeper dive on this, maybe in a webinar in the future. Just scrolling through to see if there's any more questions there that I haven't yet answered. Helena is saying, isn't the proxy form stating that that is how the owner wants to vote, but the Strata manager is only passing on how the owner wants to vote? You would think so, Helena, you would think so. But clause 25 in Schedule 1, subclause 7, is expressly a limit on the exercise of a proxy. It's about proxy voting. So even directed proxies, it even covers directed proxies, and that's where the proxy holder is saying how it wants its that's where the owner is saying how it wants the proxy holder to vote. It's a blanket invalid. It's a blanket invalid. Doesn't deal with, doesn't exempt directed proxies. Can't use them. Can't use them. Too risky. Too risky to use them there. Okay. Just checking if there's anything new in those comments from anyone new. Sean is saying it is 1/20th of the number of lots. That is a good way to think about it. 5%? 5% is 1/20th. Yep. Thank you, Sean. I think I said 45 minutes ago. Not a numbers person, but it's interesting to hear all of your strategies, how you work these things out quickly. All right, now, that's proxies, that's meetings. I promised you some exciting news before we wrap out. For a little while now, I have been giving pro members inside our online community, who are mostly Strata managers, access to a CPD library. In our online platform they log into, they can record their time spent consuming podcasts, videos, live chats, just like this one, where we do lots of learning, lots of Strata education, and they can claim that time towards their elective CPD points. And as you've heard today, I also do some exclusive online training with Strata managers, one-to-one with me and their team, and they get CPD points through that training as well. Now, you might have heard on the podcast just last week, I was chatting to Sasha Bowe at Real Estate Training Solutions, that lots has changed when it comes to the CPD requirements for New South Wales Strata managing agents, where you could once complete 6 hours of elective CPD and 3 hours of compulsory CPD on specific set topics. Now, Sasha's told us, all you have to do is complete 4 hours of compulsory CPD on specific topics that are set by New South Wales Fair Trading. That compulsory training on those compulsory topics has to be delivered by a provider who is approved by Fair Trading. And if you do your 4 hours on your compulsory topics in an interactive environment with an approved training provider, you don't have to do any elective topics anymore if you don't want to. Many Strata managers out there want to do as much learning as they can. They'll still be doing their electives, but you can do 4 hours of compulsory topics with an approved provider and you're done for your CPD year. Now, I've said interactive environment. What does that mean? That means online via interactive webinar. So a live webinar, you're getting asked questions, you're awake, you're there, that has no more than 25 people on it. So small group webinar, or in person, real life, face-to-face in a room of no more than 40 people. So if you're doing your compulsory topics 4 hours in one of those environments, then you are ticking off Class 1 or Class 2 agent in New South Wales. You are ticking off your CPD requirements for the year. And exciting news is, as of this week, literally Monday, your Strata property via Amanda Farmer is an approved provider, authorized to deliver CPD training on the compulsory topics for Strata managing agents. So where we were previously giving you support for your elective topics, we are now able to deliver your compulsory topics and tick off all of those hours of CPD training for our New South Wales Strata managers. So this is something that our current Pro members will be hearing from directly from me over the next few weeks as I check in with each of you to see if your mandatory CPD hours are something that you still need to cover off for this CPD year and haven't yet put into your training plan being something else that New South Wales Fair Trading requires. And if you would like to join with us here at Your Strata Property and have your mandatory training delivered through me in very much this kind of a setting where you are asking, I am answering, and we are all learning as best we can. I am putting together that program to make sure that we meet all of the requirements for the mandatory CPD topics, some quite rigorous requirements that New South Wales Fair Trading has set. And when I reach out to you, I will let you know what the details of that program are and see in what format. Interactive webinar, face-to-face, our Pro members would like to have that delivered to them. So really exciting times. If you are not a Pro member, but you are a Strata manager and you are looking to tick off those mandatory CPD hours and you'd love to do that through me and Your Strata Property, you've been watching the show here for a while, you've attended some of the free webinars, you understand my style, how I teach, how I share the experience of my clients and our owners inside our online membership community to help you better serve those owners, then absolutely, let's have a chat about what we can offer through the Pro membership and how we're delivering our mandatory CPD hours for this year. Thank you for the congratulations that I am getting here in the chat. I can see the well dones and the congrats. Thank you very much. John's wondering, CPD, certified professionally by a doctor? No, not the CPD. See, I read that one, John. Not the CPD that we're talking about. Continuing professional development. Cheryl's saying, thanks, Amanda. Information great as usual. There's one princess in your small community that will have to get it right with the proxy. And happy Mother's Day. Oh, thanks. Happy Mother's Day to all of our Strata mothers out there. I hope that you are doing whatever the heck you want to do. Whatever you want to do on Sunday, whether it's on your own, whether it's with the family, doing something nice for you. That's what it's all about. All righty. Thank you all so much for joining me this Friday. We have breezed through another hour all about Strata. It's been lovely to have your company, and I'll send you off into your weekends. Catch you all next time. Bye-bye.